Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and today we are going to be talking about good girl conditioning. So, what is good girl conditioning? We're going to be talking about what it is like to be that girl, that woman who is always in some capacity trying to please everybody, be perfect, and how this good girl conditioning can be a really big trigger, be a really big root cause for emotional overeating, for binging, for obsessive thoughts about food, for body image issues. And so, if I'm being honest, today's episode might bring some realizations to the surface for some of you. So, wherever you are, whether you're on a walk, if you're listening to this folding laundry, if you're sitting in your car, just know that if anything that I say, hits a nerve or inspires an aha moment, just know that I am right here with you. I've likely felt whatever you're feeling, and you are in good company. Many of the women listening to this feel really similarly to you. I can't tell you how many women that I work with, like 85 to 90% of them have said that conditioning around being the quote unquote good girl is something that they struggle with on a regular basis. And, this deeply ingrained, often invisible pressure to be the good girl is real. The girl who's agreeable, the girl who doesn't make a fuss, the girl who smiles and nods, who says yes when her whole body wants to say no, the girl who goes along with the plan because she's chill, right? The one who eats what everyone else is eating because she doesn't want to make a fuss, she doesn't want to cause conflict, she doesn't want there to be any kind of hassle, right? The one who says, I'm fine, right? Even when everything is unraveling inside. And so if you've ever felt like your body, your physical body was holding the weight of things that you weren't allowed or didn't feel comfortable to say out loud, and if you've ever found yourself eating alone at the end of a long day, not because you were hungry, but because you were just tired of holding everything in yourself and you just wanted some sort of comfort, some sort of relief, this episode is definitely going to be one that you want to listen to. You might want to listen to it more than one time. Okay, so let's talk about the good girl trap and how it can shape us. Because at the get, let's just start by calling the good girl trap what it is. It's conditioning, right? From a really young age, so many of us, particularly women, were taught to be pleasant, to be quiet, to be helpful, not to make waves, to be easy to love, easy to handle. Maybe you were even the peacemaker in your family. Maybe you learned that speaking your truth meant conflict or worse, rejection or being exiled from the culture of your family, from the tribe that whether it was chosen family or actual blood family, right? Maybe when you did express something that you needed, right? When you expressed emotion, when there was energy or charge behind something that you were asking for, you were met with, don't be dramatic, right? You're being too dramatic. You're so sensitive. You're fine. Stop overreacting, right? Like all of these sort of dismissive responses. Dismissive, judgmental, and offensive responses. And so little by little, you learned that it was safer to swallow your feelings. It was safer to stay agreeable, keep it inside, to nod instead of challenge, to say yes when you meant no, to make sure everyone else was okay, even if it meant that you weren't, even if it meant that you were abandoning your truth, your emotional truth. And do you know where those swallowed emotions go? They get reintegrated into your body. That's where they go. They get reintegrated into your body, they get reintegrated into your nervous system, and the symptom of this reintegration is your late night eating habits, your binging, right? The compulsive energy, the urgent energy. Because the pressure to be the good girl, right? It doesn't just live in one area of your life. It ends up having tentacles in your relationship with eating and in the way that you feel about food. Here's something that I learned through my own healing experience, right? When you don't feel safe to express yourself, you find other ways to release. Energy has to go somewhere. If you emotions have charge, they have energy, feelings have charge. That charge needs to go somewhere. When you stuff it down or you ignore it or you're agreeable, you just swallow it up, it doesn't just disappear. It needs to be released. And for many of us, and for many of you, most likely, that release comes through food. It comes through your eating habits. It comes through the way that your brain obsesses about food, about your body. And food specifically, and the ritual of eating food becomes that place and that space where you don't have to pretend, right? You can just take what is yours. You could take the comfort, you could take the support, you could take the relief, you could take the feeling of being uh of being supported. That's what food does when we're in this space with it, right? You don't have to pretend anything. You don't have to twist yourself into pretzel, right? You can finally breathe. You don't have to explain or justify anything to meet someone else's expectations. And even more than that, emotional overeating and binging and this compulsive urgent energy with food, why it becomes such an attractive release is because it's not rebellion in the loud dramatic sense. It's like it's quiet, it's private. It could be done in secret, which is something that's really attractive to a lot of people that struggle with emotional overeating as a coping mechanism like this. Right? But you also don't have to perform. You don't have to be chill. You don't have to pretend to be chill. You don't have to pretend to be anything. Right? Food doesn't judge or argue. This is what makes it so complicated. Because you might spend all day making sure other people are comfortable, right? You might spend all day just plastering on that fake smile, smiling when it's not really authentic, agreeing when you want to object, bending to someone else's needs to make their life easier. And then when you're finally alone, you eat. Not out of hunger, but out of depletion, out of self-abandonment, out of the exhaustion of holding everything in. And so ways that this can show up is that you might find yourself, and oftentimes this will show up in in interpersonal dynamics as well. So you might find yourself eating what your partner wants even when you don't want it, when you're not hungry, right? I had an episode about this just recently, right? You might find yourself pretending that you're super chill and easy around food because being honest feels like it's too overwhelming. You might sneak food later, right? You might like pretend like you're not hungry now or just like, avoid eating, but then later you sneak down to the fridge and you kind of eat whatever you want because you didn't want the judgment of other people when you actually had something that you wanted to eat, but maybe you thought you might get judged for it by other people, or maybe even yourself, you were judging yourself. And so this is the emotional eating and the emotional overeating that comes from not taking up space in your life, not feeling worthy to take up space in the emotional sense, right? So taking up space in the emotional sense of being able to speak your mind, have feelings, put your preferences out there and have them met with collaboration and support. I remember what it felt like to be stuck in the cycle of emotional eating. I tried every diet out there, counting, tracking, restricting, but nothing ever worked. Food controlled my life, my thoughts, and I constantly felt guilty after eating. But once I learned how to heal the emotional triggers behind my eating and trust my body, everything changed. I stopped obsessing over food, the weight started coming off naturally, and I found real freedom in how I ate and lived. So, I created the Sober Eating year-long mentorship to help other women experience the same transformation. So you can stop battling with food, you can lose weight without deprivation, and you can feel confident in your body again. In this mentorship, you'll have access to my proven nervous system rewiring method. You'll have access to live coaching with me, weekly accountability, and a community of women who truly understand your journey. You'll also have free access to my signature programs, the Emotional Eating Solution and Decoding Permanent Weight Loss, valued at $2,000. Click the link in the show notes to explore the mentorship today. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you every step of the way. It's really easy to miss on the surface this conditioning because oftentimes on the outside you're presenting as so fine, right? On the surface everything is light, it's easy breezy, right? You're pleasant, you're accommodating, you're chill, you're low maintenance, right? Like nothing really bothers you. But inside, you're screaming, and food ends up becoming the place where all of this pent up emotion and food, but eating, right? Like the act of eating ends up being the place where your voice gets heard. Your eating behavior is representative of what really is going on inside. Compulsive eating, that like urge to um, just eat everything, that is the screaming in behavior form. Okay, so let's talk about the cycle because people pleasing doesn't just lead to occasional overeating. And it doesn't just lead to occasional overeating, it leads to emotional burnout. When you're constantly giving from an empty vessel, like saying yes to things you don't want to do, showing up for people who never ask how you're doing, offering to be the support for everybody else when you don't really feel like you're being supported, right? The give to get thing, right? Where you give so much support, hoping that that'll mean other people support you, but hoping that that feeling that you get from giving other people support will fill your cup, but it never really does. Right? Smiling when you want to cry. What happens in all these scenarios is your emotional system just gets depleted emotionally, mentally, physically. And the fastest, most acceptable, even most culturally acceptable way to get comfort is food because it's so easy to mask emotional eating with just what we do regularly. It's easy to mask it. But we have to learn the difference and in ourselves understand first we need to understand when we're emotionally eating, emotionally overeating, when we're looking for food to soothe, to give us a dopamine spike, to give us this quick fix. And you probably, the way that you can start to understand whether or not you do emotionally overeat is starting to recognize the behavior, starting to recognize the context in which you eat some of these foods or engage in an eating experience. Right? Do you all of a sudden find yourself having this intense desire and compulsion to eat at night when everyone else has gone to bed? Right? Do you stuff your face in your car as you're running from one commitment to the next, right? And you're not really hungry, right? This isn't like I have to fit my lunch in thing. This is like I already ate lunch, but now you know, I'm going from one place to the next and I'm just gonna, you know, eat a whole carton of donuts or something or a whole bag of chips, right? Or when you finally have a couple minutes to yourself and your nervous system is still activated from being that good girl, right? These are some contexts when you can end up emotionally overeating. And it's not because you lack willpower. It's not because you're broken in some way. It's really because your nervous system is trying to calm itself down, right? Your nervous system is feeling tapped out. Like your nervous system, you're being an antenna every day, just getting pinged by a bazillion different stimuli. And so the burnout leads to binging, the compulsiveness. And then comes the guilt, then comes the shame, then comes the internal promise, like, I'll do better tomorrow. And this is the cycle, right? Does it sound eerily familiar to the diet cycle as well? Right? Where we're consistently in this cycle of self abandonment, looking for external validation to get some sort of safety, make things make sense with external validation, make things feel calm and structured and, relaxed with external validation, but it doesn't work. In the end, it makes us feel depleted because we're not really giving our needs ourself what we need, right? We're not really giving our needs a voice. We're not really tapping in to what is really going to give us that sense of calm and resolution and safety, right? So this is the burnout binge cycle, right? People pleasing, overextending, staying quiet happens again. And it's not a food issue. It's not like, oh my God, this bag of cookies it's just too tempting. The cookies are the problem. It's not a cookie problem. It's a self-worth issue. It's a boundary issue. It's a conditioned silence issue. So now that we understand the issue, now that we've given some examples of ways that this issue hatches, now that we've talked about the binge burnout cycle, how do we break the pattern? How do we stop using food, using eating behaviors to express the parts of ourselves that we've been taught to keep quiet or that we're afraid now as adults to express. So it the way that we break this pattern actually doesn't have to do with learning new ways to eat food. It doesn't happen with a meal plan, right? It's not like here's a structured meal plan with, specific portion sizes for each macronutrient. Like that, it's just totally not it's not, you know, it's not it. It's like giving a swimmer a baseball bat, right? It's just it's not the solution to the problem. The solution is starting to build self-agency. It starts with tiny acts of self-advocacy, right? Little shifts in your behavior that express to your nervous system and start to rewire the patterns of your nervous system and your brain to believe I matter. My preferences matter. My feelings matter. And here's how that can look in real life. So I'm going to give you some examples, right? So say that your friends all want to go to a certain restaurant and it's not somewhere you want to go, but everybody wants to go. But the truth is you look at the menu and it's not going to be in alignment with your goals. Instead of just being breezy and going along with it, what you can do is you can say, actually, I prefer this restaurant instead, right? And what that does is you're standing up for yourself, you're being your own advocate, which is the first step. And then you're also collaborating because you're giving another suggestion. So oftentimes conflict happens because somebody just objects. They don't give another suggestion. So they forget the collaborative part of it. Instead, they just say, no, I don't want to do that. And that just leaves the other party feeling like, rejected. Nobody likes feeling rejected. We don't like feeling rejected. Other people don't like feeling rejected. So the way to combat that is you say no and, right? So we learn about yes and in comedy. This is no and. No, and I prefer to go here. And that is part of the healing method. It's learning how to both stand up for yourself and not be contrarian, right? And if somebody responds badly to that, that's a them problem. That's not a you problem because you are attempting to be collaborative. Okay, another example is ordering what you really want, not what you should want, or not what someone else wants you to have, or not because people want to share something. And if you ordered something else, it's inconvenient. It's always convenient to order what you want. Okay, that should just be a given, right? You can say no to something, right? If it's not a collaborative situation, you could say no without giving a 5-minute explanation, right? These are some interpersonal things, some intrapersonal things, like with yourself, because we have to have a relationship with ourselves, not with other people, is taking 5 minutes to check in with your hunger cues before you eat, regardless of what anyone else is doing. And that's something that you probably want to practice doing. I get that question all the time. How do I connect to myself? This is a really good practice. It's not going to be something that your nervous system's familiar with, right? So it's going to might feel like you're pulling a heavy rock up a mountain in the beginning. It's not going to be natural. But all things that feel natural eventually were not feeling natural. They felt natural with repetition and practice. Okay. And beyond the food, like we talked about, this might mean taking up more space in conversations, like we talked about before. Right? Letting someone else feel slightly uncomfortable instead of carrying the entire emotional weight of the room. Right? If a lot of the empaths, I could say that, again, 90% of the women I work with would consider themselves empaths, right? You don't have to calibrate the energy of a room. It's not your job. to make sure everything feels calm and good vibe. Because what happens when you start disentangling yourself from other people's experiences, you stop needing food to speak for yourself, right? You stop needing food to express what's really going on inside because you can use your words, right? You can use your self-agency, your boundaries. You start realizing that your needs aren't too much, right? You don't have to earn anything. You don't need permission. And you also realize that advocating for yourself, whether that's through your words or through your silence, is necessary. It's maturity, right? It actually is maturity. And so if you've been taught to keep the peace at the expense of your own needs, if you've learned to bite your tongue, smile politely while your body is holding the weight of what's unsaid, and if food has become the only place where you feel like you matter or that you are going to be safe to be you, I want you to know it's not your fault, right? You didn't choose this conditioning most likely, but it is your responsibility. And you are in this moment now where you do get to choose something different. You get to unlearn that belief that you were conditioned to believe that self-expression is selfish, because it is not selfish. You get to challenge the idea that you have to be chill or easygoing or low maintenance to be loved, or dramatic, right? Like it has to be one or the other. I have to be dramatic or I have to be super chill, right? Like you get to challenge that. And you get to eat like a normal person, like someone who matters, someone who deserves to, let it be easy, because you do. Okay, you really do. And I'm just excited for you, if you're listening to this episode, for you to start to take these small steps. And I'd love to hear how it goes. Right. So if you're listening to this episode, and you listen to it and you start to apply some of the things I said, feel free to leave comments under the episode, because we just love to see it. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have for today. So I'm wishing you to go out, practice boundaries, practice speaking, using your voice in this collaborative self-agency way. Okay, and I really can't wait to hear how it goes. And so if you are listening to this, as always, please share the podcast with anybody that you know would benefit from it. Please like us and follow us on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. Leave us a like. We love it. And where else can you hear the podcast? Yeah, I think that's it. So until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.